What is the practice that you preach of? The constant search of I, the source of the ego. Find out, who am I? The pure I is the reality, the absolute existence, consciousness, bliss. When that is forgotten, all miseries crop up. When that is held fast, the miseries do not affect the person. How long did it take you to realize the self? This question is asked because the name and form are perceived. These are the perceptions consequent to the identification of the ego with your gross body. If the ego identifies itself with the subtle mind, as in dream, the perceptions are subtle also. But in sleep, there are no perceptions. Was there an ego there still? Unless it was, there cannot be memory of having slept. Who was it that slept? You did not say in your sleep that you slept. You say it now in your wakeful state. The ego therefore is the same in wakefulness, dream and sleep. Find out the underlying reality behind these states. That is the reality underlying these. In that state, there is being alone. There is no you, nor I, nor he, nor present, nor past, nor future. It is beyond time, space and beyond expression. It is ever there. Just as a plantain tree produces offshoots in its roots before yielding fruits and then dying, and these shoots are then transplanted and they do the same. So also the original primeval master Sri Dakshinamurti cleared the doubt of his disciples in silence that left shoots which are now ever multiplying. The Guru is the shoot of that Dakshinamurti. So this question does not arise when one is self-realized. How to realize oneself in accordance with your instructions contained in your text of Truth Revealed, verse 9. The difficulty I had was in controlling my mind. It is to be done by the control of breath. If you practice it by yourself without other help, the mind is then controlled. Otherwise, the mind comes into control spontaneously in the presence of a superior power. Such is the greatness of associating with the wise man through satsang. What is the nature of happiness? If a man thinks that his happiness is due to external causes and his possessions, it is reasonable then to conclude that his happiness must increase with his possessions and diminish in possession with their decrement. Therefore, if he is devoid of possessions, his happiness then would be nothing, isn't it? What is the real experience of man then? Does it conform to this view? In deep sleep, the man is devoid of all his possessions, including his own body. Instead of being unhappy at that point in time, he is quite happy. Everyone desires, therefore, to sleep soundly. The conclusion is that happiness is inherent in the man and is not due to external causes. One must realize his self in order to open a store of unlimited happiness. Is a master necessary for self-realization? The realization is the result of the master's grace, his teachings, lectures, meditations, etc. They are only secondary aid, whereas the former is the primary and essential cause. What are the obstacles which hinder the realization of the self? They are the habits of the mind or the vasanas. How to overcome the habits of the mind? By realizing the self. It is a vicious circle. It is the ego that raises such difficulties, creating obstacles, and then suffers from perplexity of such apparent paradoxes. Find out who makes the inquiries and the self then will be found. What are the aids for self-realization? The teachings of the scriptures and of realized souls. Can such teachings be discussions, lectures, or meditations? Yes, all these are secondary aids, whereas the essential one is the master's grace. How long would it take for one to get that? Why do you desire to know? To give me hope. Even such a desire is an obstacle. The self is forever there. There is nothing without it. Be the self and the desires and doubts will disappear. Such a self is a witness in sleep, dream and waking states of existence. These states belong to the ego. The self transcends even the ego. Did you not exist in sleep? How did you know that you were asleep or unaware of the world? It is only in the waking state that you describe the experience of sleep as being unawareness. Therefore, the consciousness when you are asleep is the same as when you are awake. If you know what this waking consciousness is, you will know the consciousness which witnesses all these three states. Such a consciousness could be found by seeking the consciousness as it was in sleep. In that case, I fall asleep. No harm. It is blank. For whom it is blank? Find it out. You cannot deny yourself at any time. The self is ever there and it continues in all states. Should I remain as if in sleep and be watchful at the same time? Yes, watchfulness is the waking state. Therefore, the state will not be one of sleep, but sleepless sleep. If you go the way of your thoughts, you will be carried away by them and you will find yourself in an endless maze. So I must go back tracing on the source of the thoughts. Quite so. In that way, the thoughts will disappear and the self alone will then remain. In fact, there is no inside or outside of the self. The self is pure and absolute. It is understood intellectually only. It is not the intellect that could be a help to realization of the self. Yes, up to a certain state. Even so, realize that self transcends the intellect also. The latter must itself vanish in order to reach the self. Can destiny or karma ever come to an end? The karmas carry within them the seeds of their own destruction. Do not one's actions affect the person in their afterbirths? Are you born now? What do you think of other births? The fact is that there is neither birth nor death. Let him who is born think of death and its consequences. What time is most suitable for meditation? What is time? You tell me what it is. Time is only an idea. There is only the reality, whatever you think it is. It looks like that. If you call it time, it is time. If you call it existence, it is existence. And so on and so forth. After calling it time, you divide it into days, nights, months, years, hours, minutes, etc. The time is immaterial in your path to knowledge. But some of these rules and discipline are good for beginners. Does Maharishi enter Nirvikalp Samadhi? If the eyes are closed, it is Nirvikalp. If they are open, then it is Savikalpa. The ever-present state, however, is called the Sahaja state. Can anyone get a benefit by repeating sacred syllables or mantras that are picked up casually? No, he must be competent and initiated in such matters. I will illustrate you this by a short story. A king visited his minister at his residence. There he was told that the minister was engaged in a repetition of a sacred syllable. The king waited for him and on meeting him asked what that sacred syllable was. The minister said that it was the holiest of all, the Gayatri mantra. The king also desired to be initiated by the minister, but the minister declined and confessed his inability to initiate. So the king learned it from someone else, and on meeting the minister later, he repeated the Gayatri and wanted to know that if it was right. The minister said that the mantra was correct, but it was not proper for him to say it. When pressed for an explanation, the minister called to an attendant who was close by and ordered to take hold of the key. The order was not obeyed. The order was repeated again by the minister, and then it still was not obeyed. The king then flew into a rage and ordered the same man to get hold of the minister, and that was immediately done. The minister laughed and said that the incident was the explanation that the king needed. How? The king asked. The minister replied, the order was the same and the executor also, but the power was different. When I ordered, the effect was nothing, whereas when you ordered, there was an immediate effect. It is similar with the mantras. What is Maya or illusion? To whom is this illusion? Find it out. The illusion will vanish. Generally, people want to know about the illusion and do not examine to whom it is. It is very foolish. The illusion is outside and unknown, but the seeker is considered to be known and is inside. Find out what is intimate instead of trying to find out the distant and the unknown. What is the Jnana Marga or the path of knowledge? Concentration of the mind is in a way common in both knowledge and yoga. Yoga aims to union the individual with the universal. That is the reality. The reality cannot be new. It must exist even now, and it does exist. Therefore, the path of knowledge tries to find out how the separation came about. The separation is from the reality only. Is not brahmacharya or celibacy necessary for the realization of the self? Brahmacharya is living in Brahman. It is not the connection with the celibacy of the person. Real brahmachari is the one who lives in Brahman, finds bliss in the Brahman, which is same as the self. Why then should you not look at other sources of happiness? In fact, this emergence of the ego from the self has to be the cause of all the misery. So, can then a married man realize the self? Certainly, it is the matter of the fitness of the mind. Married or or unmarried a man can realize the self, because that is here and now. If it is not so, but attainable by some efforts, and if it were new and something to be acquired, would it be worthy of that pursuit? Because what is not natural cannot be permanent either. So, in conclusion, I say that the self is always here and now and alone exists. Does my realization help others? Yes, certainly. It is the best help possible, but there are no others to be helped. For a realized being sees the self just like a goldsmith estimating gold in various jewels. When you identify yourself with the body, then only the forms and shapes are there. When you transcend the body, the others disappear along with the body consciousness. Is it the same with plants, trees, etc.? Do they all exist apart from the self? Find it out. You think that you see them. The thought is projected out from the self. Find out where from it rises. Thoughts will cease to rise and then the self alone will remain. Yes, I still understand it theoretically only. Yet the answers are simple and beautiful and very convincing. Yes, it is like a cinema show. There is a light on the screen and the shadows across them to impress the audience as an act of some peace. Apply it to yourself. You are that screen. The self has created the ego. The ego has its assertions of thoughts which are displayed as the world in trees, plants, of which you are asking about. In reality, all these are nothing but the self. If you see the self, the same will be found in all, everywhere and always. Nothing but the self exists. Even the thought of I do not realize is an hindrance. In fact, the self alone is. Why does God permit anyone to commit murder? What prompted the murderer to commit such a crime? Such an act awards him with a punishment in society. You speak of one life taken away, but what about the innumerable lives lost in wars?